So the margin of error literally put us out of business. I mean, that's why jazz only lasted for 2.5 years, is because from month to month, it could look like we went from no listeners to double what we had in an average month. The averages were around 2.8, which is low, but could still make top 10 in some months. So, but that's pretty decent for a niche radio like jazz, which is a niche radio. It's kind of like gospel or classical. We have a niche audience.
Niche, yeah.
Niche audience. So, yeah, so the whole rating things, because what they do is based on those couple of hundred surveys, a couple of hundred people wearing a little people device. The interesting thing now is that the people meter, if I'm sitting in a cube farm and I don't have a radio on, but the guy next to me is listening to country western, even if I hate it, my ppm picks it up because that's my exposure, and that's legitimate. It means that if commercial plays on that station, I'm exposed to it, even though I'm not actively listening to that radio station. But it does accurately pick up every time someone is in their car and turns the station or goes to CD or something like that.
That's great.
So it's a little more accurate than having people guess. You don't get the bump that we used to get, because what you really, really wanted in life was to have your P1s, which is your listeners who sleep with you, who never turn your radio station off. It's constantly on. That's your prime people that just love your station. You want those people to get a book. You want those people to be in the survey, because they're going to look great, because you're going to be on 24 hours. And so it used to be that even if they weren't listening, they would lie and they would put you in a lot. And now no one can lie. No one can lie because the device is picking up the signals. So you can't. There's nothing to be manually recorded. You can't skew it. And the device even picks up if it's motionless. So you can't just put the device on a table and fall asleep, because after a certain amount of inactivity, it determines that you're at rest.
What do you call those? The
something that moves it. Yes, you'd have to be really clever, but so it still can be done. But and we also buy agreement with them to buy, and of course we have to buy the results. We pay huge sums of money to buy their results from them. So we pay for all of that, despite it not being that accurate. But so do the agencies. So the agencies buy that, and the agencies use those extrapolated numbers from maybe 200 devices out of 1 million people. Hopefully it's more now, but it's still pretty small. It's still a pretty small sample. And whatever happens from that small sampling, that's what the agencies will use to determine how big an audience we have and what the demographics of that audience are, because they know the demographics of people wearing the devices. And based on those numbers is what they will set how much they're willing to pay. So, say morning shows, which is the most expensive minute to buy for advertisers.
How much is it a minute?
It can be as high as $400 or $500.
Do they
per spot?
Per spot.
It's more typical for it to be $100 to $200 for morning show spots.
Wow.
That's the most expensive time of the day. The second most expensive time of the day is afternoon drive. So morning drive is the most expensive. Afternoon drive is the second most expensive. The third would be daytime. After that would be pretty much overnights and weekends are your sort of your generic time slots. They're not typically that prime unless you've got some specific programming that also has a really dedicated audience. So, for instance, on the AM, which is a news talk, it's skewed a little differently because there's different programs. So the drive times are still the hottest, but you might also say, when we played Rush Limbaugh at 10 o'clock, he had a certain audience that was very high, and so you would get, whatever his audience was. On the weekends, we get a little higher than average on the AM because we have like gardening shows, and they have a specific audience. People will tune in specifically, just like a TV program, which is a little different from the rest of us that just sort of randomly listen to music on the weekends, mostly when we're in the car. Sometimes if we're working, we'll have it on in the background. But now, of course, we might be using another device or something like that, which is ranked very differently. But the over-the-air terrestrial type numbers come from that sampling, and the agencies determine from that. And generally, there'll be like a going rate. The market sort of determines a going rate for um, the cost per thousand. Basically, is what they're looking at. They're looking at how much do they have to spend per thousand impressions um, with a spot going out. So in the morning, very high audience. Even though the spots might cost $100 or $200, the cost per thousand listening might be the same for a $200 spot in the morning as for a $10 or $20 spot at midnight, because very few people are listening. It doesn't cost very much, but you don't get very many impressions. So that's what they're looking for, is what's our cost per impression, what's our cost per thousand impressions. And they're doing that from the numbers they get off of those surveys. And that's why there's always that dance between the sales departments and management and the programming departments. Programming departments always want fewer commercial slots. And DJs, of course, will always want fewer commercial slots.
Is that listeners hate commercials?
Yeah, they interrupt the music. They interrupt what they consider to be the main programming that people are tuning in for. People aren't tuning in for the commercials, although they benefit from them at times. We do actually like commercials that apply to us or that entertain us. I mean, if we're looking for a new dry cleaner, then we're serviced by hearing dry cleaner commercials because we're looking for that information. But it's very random. We don't tune in simply going, I hope they play a dry cleaner commercial. Whereas we do tune in and say, I hope they play theme from Titanic again. If you're crazy, a Celine Dion fan. So, so there's always that dance. Typically, if you're a news talk, you can get away with a whole bunch of sponsorships, 5-second tags, 10-second tags, 15-second tags, even 3-second liners that introduce, this show brought to you by blah, blah, just one-offs. I mean, so you can squeeze a lot of sold things into news talk, which makes it one of the most profitable.
And now tweets even.
Yeah, which makes it one of the most profitable formats to run. But then like Dudley and Bob or Jason and Dad, the hot morning shows, they probably, I haven't looked, but I would guess they run no more than 11 slots for commercials. So.
You mean the live promos?
Counting live promos, they probably only have 11 total slots for commercial availabilities per hour.
Really?
I would doubt they have because I don't know if very many formats that run more than 11 or 12 max.
In an hour or?
In an hour.
Okay, no, yeah, 11
so that's like,
right.
So that's like 4-4.
So you're talking about 44.
4 and 3. You'll have a block of 4 and a block of 4 and a block of 3. That's 11 spots.
Oh, that's the formula. I mean, you know when I mean, if you see one of my how I do it when I'm writing the what's going on for the day, I will.
Some of my training tools.
I just.
There's your clocks. So you got your commercial clock, you got your music and programming clock, and when you put them together, you have your on-air clock. They literally have to merge these two clocks at the end of every day. And if you're a P1, if you're an avid listener to a station, you can hear their clock. They'll have, as you know, probably from watching the morning show, if you had an opportunity to do so, like a morning show. Let's say like a morning show. If there's 4 hours of morning show, they have at least 2, but probably 3 slightly different clocks, meaning that they're moving the commercial groupings slightly different so that you don't every single hour break for music at 15 after. You don't want your clock to be that predictable. So you design, as a programmer, at least a couple of these different clocks, and you stagger them, especially now that the morning shows are not odd numbers. It was easier when the morning shows used to be 3 hours. Now they're mostly like 4. So it's a little hard to stagger them. But like the clock you played at 6 a.m. on Monday, you don't want that to be the same clock that you use on 6 o'clock Tuesday. So at the very least, you got to have 2 or 3 clocks so that you can, if you have an A and B, you run A at 6 a.m. on Monday and you run B at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, but you might have A again on Wednesday. And then since there's 5 days in a work week, they would naturally, if you did them every other day, they'd stagger. The next Monday, you'd get the B clock on Monday and the A clock on Tuesday. You see what I'm saying? It would rotate. And if you have 3 clocks, that makes it even easier. So they're basically the same kind of format. It's just they're just kind of moving the commercial blocks. They might be breaking them up a little differently, something so that it isn't so predictable. But your P1s, they listen all the time, so they feel it. They know.
I'm a P1.
You know when, what time of the day on different days. And you kind of know, well, if the break is at 5 after, then I know there's going to be another break at 20. If the break's at the top of the hour, I know there's going to be another break at 20 after. I mean, you just feel it. You listen so much that you know which clock they're on. You have a sense of what's coming. And the same is true with the music. Now, this is different from, for morning shows, they're not quite as stiff because obviously they're not playing on a format like Jason and Deb or Dudley and Bob hardly play any music at all. They're just talking. So their clock is mostly just moving.
I got hired on them a year ago, but I had a motorcycle, so I live in San Marcos, so it's kind of impossible. And oh man, they make like personalities out of their interns, and
it's a little different. Yeah, very different setting there. But there's almost no music on those morning shows. I think Jason and Deb play a little bit. Dudley and Bob rarely play any music at all unless they have a guest or something like that. It's mostly just they're talking, entertaining. But the rest of the day, like if you listen the rest of the day, you can start to pick up. They also rotate the music. So you've got your hottest categories. Just for simplicity, they're often called A, B, and C. There's not very many of those. There'll be maybe as little as 3 A's, your top hottest songs. If you listen to something like a format like hits, where the music turns over very quickly, so it's all about the really current music, you'll know, if you listen even one day, you'll know which are the top 3 songs, because they probably will play with a separation of less than 20 minutes that one of those 3 songs will play.
How do you get to be one of those 3 songs?
You are a hot artist that everyone's anticipating their music. You are a new artist who has a really strong marketing campaign that has really good relationships with the DJs, and so you can call up and say...
DJs or program directors?
Program directors. Program and music directors. The program and music directors usually...
I think it's funny that they say that they're
together.
DJ. Like Deb was saying, I'm the number 1 female DJ in Austin. I'm like, do you know how to even work the board?
Doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And doesn't have
on-air personality.
It doesn't have any. Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the music.
Yeah, I'm a DJ.
The music is different.
I'm a very good DJ, but I'm not.
You're not actually spinning anything. But on the high intensity music formats, the music is much more important. So, like, rotating where your hots are playing, and then you have your libraries, and so you have, your ABC, then you have recent libraries, so you've got, D and E, and then you've got theme from the Titanic, which is in your F or G category. It's still out there because on certain formats, people still want to hear a theme from Titanic. God help us.
Really?
It'll play for life. And, yes. But it's probably in the G or H. It's in one of those distant, we call them library categories.
Yeah.
And the library categories tend to appear at the top and bottom of the hour, and the reason for that is because if you run out of time, that's where you drop a song, because you legally must give your top of the hour ID within 5 minutes of that top of the hour. So somewhere between 5 before and 5 after, you must do that legal ID, which is your call letters and your city of license. Doesn't have anything to do with the number, it's the calls. So you have to say KLBJ FM,
Oh yeah, I know. I actually knew.
Austin, Texas. Or you'll notice that
FCC.
you'll notice a lot of them.
Station identified.
You know, a lot of the stations are licensed to Gonzales, to Buda, to
Yes.
some smaller town. They're not licensed to Austin. They're actually licensed to smaller towns. And that's how they got their license. And they have done funky antennas just to pick up most of Austin as a market. So you know that's all kind of politics. So, but yeah, and every day. So like the work I do is mostly involved with this traffic clock, and we have a traffic department. Nothing to do with cars, just trafficking these commercials. And the traffic department, I don't know if you ever come across them. They're over by Promo, and very very important part of the puzzle because they each have a station or two in our case that when the salesperson goes out and signs the contracts for, say, HEB is going to buy, they're going to spend $1,000, and we agree to give them, you know, I don't know, 50 commercials, and out of that 50, 20 of them are going to be morning drives, 10 are afternoon drives, and the rest can be rotators. They can go anywhere.